Well, good morning, everyone. How are we doing? Cool. We're all awake. Thank you, Jenny, for playing that piece for us. Wasn't she amazing? I think we should give her a round of applause. Thank you, Jenny. Such a talented individual. So if we haven't met, my name's Ben and I lead the creative work here at The Forge. I'm on staff here and I've been tasked this morning with continuing this series, Bystander, where we're looking at the account of Jesus' life through the eyes of someone that walked beside him, one of his disciples and one of his friends, someone that stood beside him, a bystander called John. So we're going through the book of John, and if it's your first time this morning, just want to say you are so welcome. We are delighted that you're here, and don't worry, this talk will make sense. Well, I really hope it makes sense as a standalone talk. But I would encourage you just to go to forgechurch.com and you can watch all the previous parts. As Martin kicked off week 1 by looking at water into wine, one of Jesus' first signs, and Lois did an incredible job last week unpacking what it means to put our trust in God through one of Jesus' healing miracles. So I'm feeling the pressure this morning because I think this series has been amazing. It's been really well started, and I feel that I've been given a topic that could potentially be quite controversial. And my boss, Steve, who you might have seen on stage here before, has decided to go away and leave me to it. What could go wrong? I don't have a history of saying bad things on stage here at all. Check our social media. So I'm feeling the pressure this morning, and to be honest, I'm speaking on something that I really struggle with myself, something that I am struggling to get to grips with, something that I'm wrestling with every day in my life in this particular social media, political climate that we're living in. So this is the big idea. This is the thing that I want us to take away today. This is the thing that I want you to remember. This is the thing that you can write me angry Facebook comments about. I don't know if you've seen some of them recently, but I would value your prayers as I navigate those. But here's the big idea. This is what I want us to take away. When your version of religion gets in the way of love, you have the wrong version. When your version of religion gets in the way of love, it's the wrong version. Have you ever been in a situation where commandments were given priority over compassion? Have you ever been a victim to this? Have you ever seen this where sacred men in sacred spaces interpret a text or a law that means they withhold compassion or mistreat someone? The church has a reputation for this. As I mentioned, I get some quite interesting Facebook comments. Here's one that I got this week. There is no evidence of God. Religion is brainwashed cult nonsense. I realized that when I was 12. All the Christians I've met are some of the most arrogant, misogynistic, homophobic, hateful people around. Harsh, I thought. Unfair, I thought. Is that how you spell misogynistic? I thought. Then again, I've actually been a victim to this commandment over compassion way of thinking. So part of my job here is that I lead worship, and I've led worship for a long time, just as Ben has done an amazing job this morning of. And I was leading worship at this event in Essex, over the border. That's where I'm from. And I was leading worship at this event, and it was at what I would call a proper church, not like this with like drums and stuff. It was a proper church, and I was leading an event there. And I went, and I had my case, I had my guitar, and I carry a little case and sometimes a stand as well. I got there in plenty of time, because I'm always on time, and went in and met the event organizer, and they introduced me to the people whose church it was, said hello, and started unpacking my things on the stage. So I got my capo out of my bag and I put it on this table. I got my guitar strap out, I put it on the table. And then I thought, actually, should I just, instead of the table being behind me like it was there, I was like, how about I just move the table and put it over here? Then I can have like a bottle of water on it and maybe some lyrics, like in case I forget the words. And I asked the event organizer, he said, yeah, great idea, help me move it. It was a very heavy table, and we put it next to me here. And then I continued my sound check, mic check, 1, 2, 1, 2, all of that. And then this guy rushed in, and he'd honestly turned the colour of a beetroot. He was absolutely furious at me. I mean, he was shouting. He was properly had lost his temper at me. And it turns out that I had moved a sacred altar and not, in fact, a table to keep some water. And the altar that I had moved, I should or would need consent from some sort of diocesan court or something to be able to move the location of, not a place to keep a cup of coffee whilst you lead in worship. So I was in deep, deep trouble and was asked actually not to lead worship at this event. But the event organizer talked him around, and I think it worked out fine. I ended up singing a few songs, but I wasn't invited back. And it's not actually, I got in trouble again since, and any of you that have been part of the Salvation Army will be horrified at the mere mention that I once stage dived off the mercy seat. Now, I thought a mercy seat was a seat, but it's not, and you can't stage dive off it, otherwise people will get angry. But have you ever been on the receiving end of this? Have you ever been on the receiving end of religious commandments having priority or being given priority over compassion? As someone that's been a Christian for a long time, that has led worship in various places for various Christian big names, that's been had some formal theological training, that's been to prestigious and well-respected worship schools, I can be accused and still am accused of being a know-it-all. I'm an opinionated guy, I'm a passionate guy, I see things black and white, and I'm the same with my theology. If you've ever spent one-on-one time with me, you'll know probably exactly what I think and when I'm thinking it. So I am so challenged by this idea, and I am working on this in my own life. You see, I get so focused on what is written, I lose sight of why it's written. Do you focus on what is written instead of why it's written? You see, sometimes I get so focused or so obsessed with the speck in someone else's eye that I forget to take the plank or the log out of my own eye. We see this time and time again in the Bible, and this was exactly the sort of behavior that Jesus did not like, because it's not Jesus-like behavior. Time and time again, we see Jesus criticize religious leaders, Pharisees, because they do this. They focus on what is written, not why it was written. And that's today's message as we continue looking through John's account of Jesus' life. John, who wrote this or probably dictated this, didn't just write this so that we had a series to do in the run up to Christmas. He actually wrote it with a purpose in mind. This is the purpose that he wrote it. He tells us, he goes, "But these things are written so that you may believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that by believing him, you may have life in his name." So he organizes these events, the events that he is a bystander of, that he's a witness to, into 7 signs. These signs convinced him, and he wants them to convince us, that Jesus is in fact the Messiah. And as I said, firstly, we looked at water into wine, and Martin did an incredible job of that for us. And last week, Lois unpacked a story of Jesus healing a dying boy without even seeing him, and it was an amazing talk. Go and catch up on that one. But today, we're looking at the third sign. The third sign, healing on the Sabbath. So, if you remember from last time, Jesus is in Cana, which is north of Jerusalem. He's attending a wedding up there, which is where we see the previous miracles happen. We pick up the story in John 5. John 5 says, "Sometime later, Jesus went up to Jerusalem for one of the Jewish festivals." We're not sure what Jewish festival this was, but he always went up to Jerusalem. Even though he was north of Jerusalem, he always went up to Jerusalem because it's a city on a hill. Now, there is in Jerusalem, near the sheep gate, a pool, which in Aramaic is called Bethesda, which is surrounded by 5 covered colonnades. Maybe it looked a little bit like this. Here, a great number of disabled people used to lie: the blind, the lamed, the paralyzed. These were the most desperate group of people you could imagine. There's no, we're 2,000 years ago. There's no NHS. There's no Ask My GP, although maybe some of you would be grateful that there's no Ask My GP. If you were sick or if you had a disability and you were poor, you had to rely on the temple or superstitions to get better. Only the rich had access to doctors, and even the access that they had to doctors, the doctors were not very good. So they are completely desperate. Now, the reason why these sick people gathered around this pool is because there was a superstition. As I said, poor people relied on superstition, that an angel would hover and disturb the water, leading to this hot tub situation that you can see going on in the middle there, some sort of jacuzzi spa. Now, we've since excavated this, and it's actually this pool that you can go and visit. I was speaking to Pete in the break, who's serving coffee. He's been there, and it's actually fed by a reservoir, which might account for the disturbance. And it's amazing that these things that we read, right, are backed up. We can go there today. The superstition was that an angel was stirring the water, and if you got in the water first, you might be healed. So the sick, the lame, the paralyzed would lie on the edge of the water just with a hope, with a chance to be well. Can you imagine the desperation? Can you imagine the chaos? The blind, the lame, the paralyzed, the severely handicapped, lining the edge of the water, waiting for their chance, maybe having to climb or scramble over dead bodies that hadn't made it or drowned from failed attempts to get in the water. The fact that Jesus even visits here is amazing, because this is not somewhere that you would find well people. This is not somewhere that you would find healthy people hanging out. It was dirty. It must have absolutely stank, and people just wait there all day, just hoping and praying for a chance. And Jesus approaches this man. The text says, one who was there had been invalid for 38 years. There's a detail given here, 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there, he learned that he'd been in this condition for a long time. We don't know why this guy was chosen specifically, or why it's, maybe he was there the longest, and maybe that's why it was recorded. But Jesus saw him and decided it was time for a sign. And I kind of imagine that he leaned down in the chaos, in the smell, in all of this, in this kind of horrible space, leaned down and spoke to him, and he said, do you want to get well? Do you want to get well? Let me ask you this morning, do you want to get well? Do you want to get well? This week, or last week, I watched this documentary on John Candy. I don't know if you're familiar with John Candy, but he's one of my favourite actors from some of my favourite films, Uncle Buck, Home Alone, and probably one of my top 3 films of all time, Trains, Planes, and Automobiles. I don't know if I can get an amen on any of that, but yes, thank you very much. And he also played a guy called Lasky. I don't know if you know that, in one of his films. So me and John, we're tight. We're tight. And the documentary was amazing. No one really has a bad word to say about this man here, John Candy. But he was an incredibly sick man. He was incredibly unwell because he was very overweight and he had multiple health issues. But he would refuse to go and see a doctor. He would refuse to see a doctor because he knew the doctor would tell him to stop drinking and stop eating junk. So he refused to go. Do you want to get well? John Candy died at 43 years old. Not all of us want to get well. Do you want to get well? Sometimes getting well requires more humility than staying sick. So whether it's kicking that unhealthy habit that you just can't seem to kick off online, or that health kick that you really want to get into, really, truly, do you want to get well? And is the reason you don't want to get well because you're not willing to put the work in or do the work to enable you to be well? The Jews knew this because John chose to include this detail that the man had been in this way for 38 years. Now, 38 years will have sent alarm bells ringing to the Jewish audience, because 38 years is the amount of time that between Sinai and the Jews reaching the Promised Land. So the forefathers of this audience will have been trapped in the wilderness for 38 years, when they were released from the hands of the of the Egyptians. You might have seen Prince of Egypt. Have you seen John Candy's not in that one, but Prince of Egypt is a great film. I sang in the first service, got some feedback not to in this service, but that's fine. So the Jewish people understood that it was their unbelief that had made them stay in the wilderness for 38 years. God had a plan. God had a plan to release them straight into the Promised Land. But it took 38 years to train the unbelief out of them. Maybe the same could be said for this man. Maybe the same can be said for you this morning. But God is not one that's just going to pick you up and drop you off. He wasn't going to impose his will. So he asked the question. He asked the question, do you want to get well? Sir, the invalid replied, I have no one to help me get in the pool when the water is stirred. While I'm trying to get in, someone goes in ahead of me. Imagine the chaos, the desperation, the disappointment, the blind, the lame, the paralyzed. Then Jesus said to him, get up. Now, interestingly, the word used here in Greek can be translated to wake up, rise up, come to life. And what he said next made what was seemingly just a random act of kindness, made it significant. Much like the water to wine, it wasn't just a one-off, it was significant. It had significant meaning. He said to the man, pick up your mat and walk. At once the man was cured. He picked up his mat and walked. And as he turned, Jesus disappeared into the crowd. But in asking the man to get up and walk, he had just opened the biggest can of worms. He had just whacked a hornet's nest. He had just dropped the biggest bombshell and he'd done it on purpose. The day on which this took place was a Sabbath. Now, on the Sabbath, Jewish leaders, Jewish officials would patrol the streets to make sure that people were keeping the laws of the Sabbath. They were correctly observing the Sabbath. So as this man picks up his mat and walks off probably towards the temple to give thanks, he's free for the first time in 38 years. He's left the pool. And he's off to worship. He's off to give thanks to God for this incredible miracle. And when Jewish officials see him carrying his mat, the Jewish leaders say to the man who's been healed, it is the Sabbath. The law forbids you to carry your mat. But actually, it didn't. The law didn't forbid the man from carrying his mat, but their oral tradition did. You see, when Moses, as I just meant, I don't have time to go into the whole story, but try and stay with me if you can. But Moses came down from Mount Sinai with the Torah, with the law that Jews still follow to this day. So there was a written tradition, which is the Torah, and then the oral tradition. So this is passed down through generations and generations. And this was supposed to carry as much weight and as much reverence as the written Torah. And in there was 39 categories of work forbidden on the Sabbath. Not 39 things, 39 categories of things that were forbidden for working on the Sabbath. And one of these rules, one of these oral traditions, is that you can't carry something from one place to another on the Sabbath. So the Jewish leaders are saying, look, you have broken the fourth commandment. Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. But the point of this commandment was to take a break from labor, not to take a break from love. To take a break from your profession, not to take a break from compassion. And this is what happens. This is what happens when religious people, or this is what happens when we ignore the why behind the what. It's when your version of religion gets in the way of love, you have the wrong version. This is what happens to us when we're defending a theological ideology, a theological system or an ideology or a political agenda, or we're too loyal to a party. This is what happens when these things take precedence over the people that are actually designed to benefit and to serve. And it's so difficult to recognize within ourselves, because right now you're sitting there and you're thinking of the other ideology, the other theology, the other political party. You're sitting there and thinking, gosh, I wish there was a conservative, more conservatives here so they could listen to what Ben's speaking about and they could improve on this. And then there's some of you that are thinking, I wish there was more Labour voters here because then they could listen to what Ben said and they would get it right. I do that a lot. I wish that people would be in talks that I've heard or messages that I've heard. And again, that's because I'm too busy removing the speck from someone else's eye that I fail to see the log or the plank in my own eye. We must all look in the mirror. We must all be careful and honest. Because when what's best for people is no longer what's most important to you, you are at odds with God. When what's best for people is no longer what's most important to me, I am at odds with God. And the reason why this is so important and the reason why we know it's true is because John, who's the writer and the author of this book, he writes another famous verse. And even if it's your first time in church this morning, you'll have probably heard this verse spoken. For God so loved the world. For God so loved people. For God so loved Reform voters. For God so loved Liberal Democrats. For God so loved every single race, every gender, every religion, that he gave his one and only Son to die on the cross for our sins. There's no if, there's no but, there's no clause. As I was preparing this message, Sarah Fenton reminded me of this really powerful scene reported by BBC News in 2011 when there was civil unrest in Egypt. There's this image here of Christians defending Muslims and creating a human chain as they pray. So during the day of departure process into Tahrir Square last Friday, Coptic Christian protesters made a human chain around their Muslim brothers and sisters as they performed new prayers, and that's from BBC News back in 2011. Now, does that fit within their theology? Does that fit within their belief systems? Does that fit? Do they have the same way of thinking? Absolutely not. Are they called to love anyway? Yes. Because Jesus died for them too. And that's why, as a church, our mission is to help people find and follow Jesus. Not to help people that fit within our particular brand of theology. Not people that will follow this particular set of rules. But it's to help people find and follow Jesus. And the first part of that is the bit that's important. Helping people find and follow Jesus begins with helping people. We need to think people, not politics and policy. Because when your version of religion gets in the way of love, you have the wrong version. So anything I do that hurts another person is a sin. Anything I do to put distance between God and another person is a sin. Anything I do that leads me to not treat someone else with dignity is a sin. You see, we can justify our point of view with any scripture. We can make a compelling argument for just about anything if we take a couple of verses out of context and just spout them out. You can make an argument for justifying murder, for owning a slave. All you need to do is pick a couple of verses out of context and you'll have a compelling argument. You see, the greatest minds of our time and of all time have had the same evidence and still come to different conclusions. But Jesus comes to close those loopholes. When your version of religion gets in the way of love, you have the wrong version. John's writing continues. It is the Sabbath. The law forbids you to carry your mat. But he replied, and it's funny that he replied, the man who made me well, he doesn't even know who he is. He's just made him well, changed his life, said to me, pick up your mat and walk. The guy that's been healed is like, look, I don't know what to tell you, but this guy, he healed me. You guys have been telling me that I deserve this. You guys have been telling me that not to go here and not to go there because I'm spiritually unclean. You guys have done nothing for me. So actually, I'm going to side with the guy that's healed me. You see, the religious leaders will have believed that this man deserved this punishment. They call it generational sin. So they'll have believed that his mum or someone in his family will have sinned, which is why he was the way that he was. They would have thought that he deserved it, and Jesus gave him what he didn't deserve. So they ask him, who is this fellow who told you to pick up your mat and walk? Who is this person that defies the laws of the Sabbath? Because there was another rule that you couldn't heal on the Sabbath. So they're both in trouble. The Jewish leaders are making a list of who to tell off. The man who was healed had no idea who it was, for Jesus had slipped away into the crowd. Later, Jesus found him at the temple and said to him, see, you are well again. When you recognize who Jesus is, you will lose your fear of religion and religious people. When you choose to follow Jesus, religion will lose its grip on you. See, some of you are so bound up by religious guilt and religious shame that you struggle to even walk through those doors this morning. Some of you carry around so much guilt and so much shame. But what I'm telling you is when you choose to follow Jesus, religion will lose its grip on you. When your version of religion gets in the way of love, you have the wrong version. The man went away and told the Jewish leaders it was Jesus who made him well after they were reunited at the temple. So because Jesus was doing these things on the Sabbath, the Jewish leaders began to persecute him. In his defense, Jesus said to them, my Father is always at work. To this very day, I too am working. He's saying, God doesn't take a day off. He's saying, have you ever been in trouble and prayed and got God's out of office? No, that doesn't happen. Do you have to, do you send a prayer up to God and he's like, hey, I'm not working today. These are not my dedicated hours. Jesus is saying, look, by your definition, God is violating the Sabbath. So I will too, like Father, like Son. For this reason, they tried all the more to kill him. Not only was he breaking the Sabbath, but he was calling God his own Father, making himself equal with God. And Jesus is like, yeah, so guilty, I am. Very truly, I tell you, the Son can do nothing by himself. He can do only what he sees the Father doing, because whatever the Father does, the Son also does. He's saying to each and every one of us, it's so easy to overcomplicate this. We can go around in circles and we can debate theology to the nth degree, but he's saying, do you want to know what God's really like? Watch me. Do you want to know what God would actually say? Listen to me. Do you want to know what God would actually do? Follow me. He concludes a conversation with the religious leaders. You study the scriptures diligently because you think that in them you have eternal life. These are the very scriptures that testify about me, yet you refuse to come to me to have life. He's saying you opt for the written over the living. You've chosen your interpretation over the living demonstration. God put on flesh. Jesus is saying, I'm standing in front of you. The guessing is over. This is your sign. And this is why the gospel and this is why this series is so important in a world filled with competing political and social, moral and religious ideologies. God made it simple. He showed up. He put on flesh. He spoke up. He was clear. And some of you will love this message and some of you will hate this message. And for me, I'm wrestling with this every single day. Your neighbor must take priority over the potentially flawed view that you carry around inside of you. We don't always know what to believe or who to believe, but thanks to Jesus, we almost always know what love requires of us. And deep down, if you really ask yourself, you know what love requires of you. And that's enough. Does your version of Christianity get in the way of loving the people that Jesus loves? If so, it's the wrong version. And John, who knew Jesus, wrote, God is love. It's why he showed up, became one of us, put on flesh to show us how it's done. He died to pay for the times where we did not get it right. When your version of religion gets in the way of love, you have the wrong version. Jesus, will you show us? Will you reveal to us where we've got this wrong? And God, I just want to say I'm sorry. I'm sorry for where I have held so much pride and a need to be right that I haven't let love win. Will you teach us how to love in a real way? Thank you for showing us what love is. Help us to show it to others. Give us a nudge, give us wisdom, give us insight into where we've got this wrong. Where we need to ask the question, what does love require of me?